Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a closer look at the UK.
Yeah, specifically its relationship with the EU, post-Brexit, and also what's happening with its own immigration policies.
Exactly. We've got an analysis from ABC Australia covering the recent UK-EU summit, and also a quick clip from BBC News off TikTok.
Right, featuring Keir Starmer on immigration.
Our goal here really is to get past the headlines, past the noise. We want you to walk away with a proper understanding of what these sources tell us.
Where things might be heading with the EU relationship and, these potential shifts on immigration. It's about finding those key insights, maybe even a few aha moments.
Okay, let's get into it then. Starting with the UK and the EU. That ABC News report talked about the first big summit since Brexit, this idea of a reset.
Yeah, that word's been thrown around a lot.
And naturally, some people, especially Labour's opponents, are suggesting, well, could this be a sort of soft re-entry back into the EU? But Professor Menon's take was interesting, wasn't it?
It really was. He pretty firmly dismissed that soft re-entry idea.
Hmm.
He stressed the government has these, what he called clear red lines.
Right.
Rejoining just isn't, on the cards. His view was that the summit didn't actually lock down that much concrete stuff.
Yeah.
It was more like an agreement to start negotiating lots of things.
So less of a big U-turn, more like, okay, let's talk properly again.
Pretty much. Restarting those formal chats.
Now, the report also raised this other angle, Donald Trump. Could his sometimes unpredictable trade policies be pushing the UK towards the EU a bit more, keeping options open?
Well, Menon's point was that UK foreign policy tries to sort of balance things, keep good relations with both the EU and the US, not choose one over the other.
Ah.
So yeah, global trade stuff, changes in the US, that's all in the background, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
But this EU reset isn't really being sold, domestically at least, as a
Yeah.
direct reaction to Trump. It's more the UK looking out for its own interests on, multiple fronts.
Makes sense. Okay, let's talk about the bits that might actually affect people's lives. The economics. Agriculture and energy were mentioned as key areas. What's the potential upside there?
Right, agriculture. There's this agreement to negotiate a deal. Now, Professor Menon reckons the overall economic boost might be, well, relatively small, maybe £8 billion over a few years.
Which doesn't sound enormous in the grand scheme of things.
No, but if you look specifically at agri-food businesses, especially those trading across the Irish Sea, for them, it could mean lower friction costs, a real help to their bottom line, potentially.
Then crucially, this covers trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, too, because that's been a huge headache.
Exactly, that internal UK trade barrier created by Brexit. So this deal could help ease that and, importantly, maybe stop food prices rising quite as fast as they might have otherwise, putting a lid on inflation rather than lowering prices, maybe.
Okay, interesting. So avoiding more pain at the supermarket, potentially? What about energy?
Yeah, energy. The idea is for the UK to explore getting access to the EU's single energy market.
Which could be big.
Potentially, yeah. Long term, it could help stabilize energy prices. But, like agriculture, the details are really thin right now. It all depends on future negotiations actually succeeding.
So for, for us listening, are we going to feel this in our pockets anytime soon?
Professor Menon seems to think probably not in terms of sudden price drops anyway. The main benefit, like we said with food, is probably stopping things getting worse, preventing that potential price inflation if stricter import controls had kicked in.
Right. It's more about avoiding a negative than creating a big positive, perhaps.
That seems to be the assessment, yes.
Okay, let's circle back to Northern Ireland. That border situation has been so difficult. What does this potential farming deal mean there?
This is where the ABC report suggested some real potential good news. Agriculture has been a massive sticking point for the Northern Ireland border. If they can get this deal done, and it seems both sides want to, it could apparently make a massive difference, smooth out the way things operate quite significantly.
Because the protocol, while trying to avoid a hard border on the island, ended up creating barriers between GB and NI.
Exactly. Disruptions for businesses, political headaches. This agri deal aims to tackle some of that friction. That would be a pretty big step.
Okay, now the flip side. The report mentioned the fisheries deal being extended. And that hasn't gone down well everywhere, has it? Especially with some Brexit supporters?
No, definitely not. Extending access for EU boats in UK waters.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's strong criticism. But Menon puts it in context.
How so?
Economically, he says the fishing industry is, and this was his phrase, absolutely trivial to the UK economy overall. He even mentioned a comparison to Harrods turnover, I think.
Wow, okay.
But, and this is the crucial but, politically, it's hugely symbolic, very sensitive. The deal basically just continues the quota system that Boris Johnson already negotiated.
So if it's economically small but politically difficult, why extend it? What was the trade-off?
Well, this is classic negotiation, isn't it?
Well,
Menon explained the EU used fisheries as leverage. It was the price of negotiations, essentially.
the price for what?
The price for getting the UK's priorities, agriculture and energy, properly on the table and moving forward. So the UK gave ground on fish to hopefully gain more on farming and power.
Right. Okay. That makes sense in terms of strategy. So how did this whole reset package land back in the UK? Is everyone happy?
Oh, definitely not. Memon highlighted just how divided the UK still is over anything Brexit related. Some hardcore Brexit supporters see it as a betrayal,
Right.
but then others see it as a much-needed, significant, practical, pragmatic step, trying to actually deal with the real-world problems Brexit created for trade. So, yeah, very polarized, as usual.
And one last thing from that ABC report defense. There was talk of the UK maybe getting access to an EU defense loan program.
Yeah, that's another interesting one. Potential access to quite a big pot of money, maybe $150 billion for defense projects.
I know.
We'll think about the context, the war in Ukraine, obviously, and also maybe some perceived uncertainty about long-term U.S. commitment to European security under certain scenarios. It's pushing EU countries towards doing more for themselves, cooperating more.
So the UK might get involved in that?
Potentially. But Menon added a note of caution.
Yeah.
The EU program itself isn't even fully finalized yet, and the terms for UK access still very much up in the air. But if it happens, it's a definite sign of post-Brexit security cooperation.
Okay, that's a really thorough look at the EU side. Let's switch gears now, domestically. We saw that short BBC News clip on TikTok, Keir Starmer talking immigration reform. What was the headline message?
Very simple, very direct. The core promise was migration numbers will fall.
Oh.
That's what his party's aiming for with their proposed reforms. That was the main soundbite.
And being TikTok, I guess it was pretty light on the detail.
Extremely light. It was basically just that statement of intent, a commitment to get the numbers down. It's part of how news is delivered on that platform, short, punchy updates.
Right. And the comments below the video, TikTok comment sections can be lively. What were people saying?
Yeah, lively is one word for it.
Mm.
You saw the whole range, really. Quite a bit of skepticism, people saying, we've heard this before, pointing to past promises from different governments that weren't met.
A sort of believe it when I see it attitude.
Exactly. Lots of that. Then accusations of, just trying to win over voters, maybe looking at Reform UK or similar parties.
Okay.
But also different views entirely. People questioning if reducing immigration should even be the main goal. Some brought up Brexit's impact on who's coming and going now. It really reflects some mixed public feelings. But obviously, it's just social media comments, not a scientific poll.
Of course. So let's try and tie these two threads together. We've got the UK-EU relationship evolving and these domestic immigration plans being floated. What's the connection? What are the main takeaways when you look at both?
Well, it shows the UK juggling, doesn't it? On the one hand, trying to find a practical way forward with the EU after Brexit, focusing on specific deals like agriculture and energy where there's maybe mutual benefit.
Pragmatism internationally?
Sort of, yeah. And then domestically, a very clear signal trying to address public concern about immigration numbers, promising to bring them down. It's interesting how much more developed the EU discussions seem compared to the immigration stuff, which feels very much like an early announcement.
And it really highlights the trade-offs, too, like that fisheries deal being swapped for progress elsewhere.
Absolutely. International deals always involve give and take. And like Manon said, the economic gains from these EU agreements look likely to be, well, incremental, more about preventing problems than creating a sudden boom.
And it's impossible to miss how politically charged both areas are. The EU relationship, immigration, they still spark really strong feelings in the UK.
Completely. The reactions Manon described to the EU summit and those TikTok comments on immigration, they just show how deep those divisions run.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's worth saying again, the immigration plans seem very preliminary at this point, based on that clip. Just a headline promise, really.
So summing it all up, the UK seems to be walking this tightrope, trying to find practical cooperation with Europe where it makes sense, while also responding very directly to domestic pressure on immigration.
That feels about right. A kind of balancing act. Targeted international deals for economic stability, alongside moves on domestic policy driven by, clear public sentiment.
So thinking about all this, the EU reset, the immigration pledge, What do you reckon are the biggest challenges, maybe the biggest opportunities for the UK going forward, trying to balance these international ties and domestic demands? And are there maybe hidden consequences we haven't thought about yet? Definitely gives you something to chew on as things develop.
It certainly does. Lots to watch in the coming months and years.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.